What's going on, everyone? It is the Derf, and today I am building upon a previous build video in which I was able to knock out 11 million in damage during a run of Court of Blades. This build does not disappoint. In fact, I think it might even be arguably better because I gave it some quality of life improvements that I think most people, if not everyone, will appreciate. The ability to move a lot faster, the ability to spam your abilities, so to speak, huge amounts of chunk damage in an instance, and making yourself unkillable. On top of being able to generate a ton of orbs of power and be the ultimate support player for your teammates who may or may not be able to move as quickly and as efficiently as you, this build does not disappoint. I hope you guys like this one because honestly, this was one of the more fun builds I had to tinker with since starting this channel. So let's get it going. Here we go. Alright, so as you saw the clip there, just under 10 million damage for that run of Court of Blades. That's about where I ended up with multiple runs with this before I decided just to actually make the video because it was quite a bit of fun to use. So what we're doing is we're taking that 11 million damage build that I just put out and we're giving it some quality of life tweaks to make you faster and a little bit more user-friendly around the battlefield, which will help you take this into more activities and potentially have this build be even more universal than it already was. So to do that, we're going to start out with rolling with Storm Trance. Storm Trance is mainly being used for the ability to pick up Bolt Charge every time that we pick up a Orb of Power. We're not going to be using this in its super state. I mean, we're going to be using it, but we're going to be consuming it. Simply just the same way as we were with Winter's Wrath. Of course, the benefit here is that you're able to generate this super in virtually no time because it is a roaming super, and with the amount of damage you're going to be able to put out with your abilities as well as your weapon choices that you have, you're going to be able to duplicate exactly what you saw on the screen. Almost every encounter of the Court of Blades, or if you run like onslaughts or possibly raids or whatever, you will have your super ready in very little time as long as you're using Storm Trance. For abilities, we're going to go with Phoenix Dive, Burst Glide, Arcane Needle, and we're switching it up and we're going with the Storm Grenade. We're going with the Storm Grenade for its light damage generation so that we can get our melee back even faster along with everything else. For aspects, we're taking out Weaver's Call and we're throwing in Lightning Surge. When sliding, activate your charge melee ability to blink forward, calling down lightning strikes that jolt targets as you rematerialize. Targets that are hit by your lightning strikes grant you stacks of Bolt Charge. So the name of the game here is being able to generate Orbs of Power and or Bolt Charge. Either way, you get Bolt Charge, and eventually you become amplified or you stay amplified, etc., etc. Feed the Void, number 2 on the list. We're not going to be using our grenade for its normal purpose. We're going to be consuming it so as to give us amplification with our exotic armor. So the ability to have Devour procced, bringing us grenade energy back at a rapid rate as well as additional health is imperative. For fragments, first up on list is going to be Facet of Purpose. I already touched on this when explaining the super, but essentially picking up an Orb of Power grants either Bolt Charge, Restoration, Frost Armor, Woven Mail, or Overshield based on the damage type of your equipped super. Minus 10 to recovery, but I really don't care because I'm not really using my class ability that much anyways. And the key here is giving you Bolt Charge. Accumulate stacks of Arc Bolt Charge. While you have Bolt Charge, sustained weapon damage generates stacks of Bolt Charge at maximum stacks. Any ability damage generates a powerful bolt of arc lightning at the target's location. Receiving a stack of Bolt Charge grants you melee energy. So get melee energy and you get Bolt Charge every time that you pick up an Orb of Power. That's a win-win for you here. Next up is going to be Facet of Balance. Rapidly defeating targets with light damage grants melee energy. Rapidly defeating targets with darkness damage grants grenade energy. Because we're going to be using an obscene amount of stasis damage, we're going to have our grenade coming back to us extremely quickly, as well as the melee energy, simply because of the choices that we have before us. Fast of Sacrifice is next up on the list. While you have an Arc, Solar, or Void buff, ability Final Blows grant bonus Darkness Transcendence energy. Plus 10 to Discipline, so that is great. Light buffs that we're going to be taking advantage of are going to be Amplified, Bolt Charge, and Devour. So you're going to essentially have one of those three procced at any given time, which means any of your ability final blows that you do during that, you're going to get bonus Darkness Transcendence energy. So you will be able to proc Transcendence fairly regularly. It's not a Transcendence build. In other words, you're not going to be knocking it out of the park every 10 seconds, but you're going to get it enough that you're going to be able to work that into using during DPS rotations, which is going to be huge at helping you buff your overall damage in general. Massive Awakening, next fragment up on the list, rapidly defeating targets with light or darkness damage or super final blows. Generate an elemental pickup of the matching damage type. Plus 10 resilience. Of course, what we're going to be going for is Ionic Traces, and occasionally we're going to be getting Stasis Shards. Ionic Traces are going to give us ability energy throughout our abilities, and our Stasis Shards are going to give us melee energy back. So what we're going to be doing with these matching energies is a couple of things. Number one, we're going to be consuming our arc grenades so as to make us amplified and give us our arc turret. Our next up on the list is going to be using our 3-stack of Arcane Needles to be doing Lightning Surge. So anything that can help us get that back is arguably a better way of life than if we were to have the Stasis Super in our back pocket. Last but not least is going to be Facet of Protection. While surrounded by combatants, you are more resistant to incoming damage. While Transcendent, the effect is increased. This one can be equally swapped out with Facet of Dawn. If you're going into an activity where you're going to be dealing with barrier champs, then you may want to switch this out so that you can deal with those champions, because you don't technically have a barrier piercing weapon in your arsenal. For stat distribution, I'm going to recommend that you focus on resilience, discipline, and strength in that order. Resilience, of course, so that you resist all incoming damage as much as possible, and discipline so that you can constantly be consuming your arc grenade so that you can become amplified and have an autonomous turret dealing area, spreading the damage around between all of the enemies that might be surrounding you that you may or may not be able to deal with just your weapons. Strength is your dump stat, and the reason I say it's your dump stat is because even though you are going to be spamming your melee regularly, because we're going to be using light energy for ad clear, you're going to be getting your melee recharged regularly anyways, so it's really not imperative that you max that out as high as possible, which means you can throw it into intellect or recovery if you find yourself lacking in any of those. For weapons, I'm going to quickly go through what I used in the intro video, and then I'm going to give you some options to switch it up. First up is going to be Ager's Scepter. That's going to be your main damage component. Its trait, Rega's Refrain, Stasis Final Blows transfer ammo to this weapon's magazine from reserves. Ager's Call, final blows with this weapon generate a slowing burst around the defeated target. And what we're really after is the Ager's Scepter Catalyst. Long press reload drains super energy, overflowing the magazine and empowering the beam with bonus damage and the ability to slow and freeze targets until the magazine of super energy runs out or the weapon is stowed. Can only be activated while super energy is full. Because of how super energy is generated, while you're using this weapon after your super ends, you're still going to be generating your super back. So when you're in between DPS phases, whether you're in Court of Blades or a raid or onslaught or whatever, your super energy is really never going to fall below 50% if you play it right. So it's going to take a minute to kind of get used to how it all goes, but essentially you're going to be generating a ton of damage with just this weapon and consuming the super, all the while being able to use your other abilities because you're going to be able to proc Transcendence because this is a dark energy weapon, and you're going to be able to spam your melee in between. So not only will you be able to generate a lot of orbs of power, you'll also be able to regenerate your super in virtually no time. At no point during that run was I ever below, except for when we started, at the very beginning, was I really ever below, I think it was about 60%. I don't ever remember seeing it at 50 or lower, certainly. And most times when I would check to see where my super is at, I was almost always, within 10% of it being fully charged. In fact, some cases, when we got done with the first boss on a run and the second boss was spawning, my super would actually pop the last few seconds before the second bosses spawned. So, and that's going to happen to you as well. For the energy slot, I don't typically recommend this weapon often, but Noxious Vetiver does kind of fit the build here for a couple of reasons. First up is going to be you can have it roll with attrition orbs. Next up, you can have jolting feedback. With both of these working together, you're going to be an orb producing machine, which is going to be key when you're trying to gain stacks of bolt charge. So if you're dumping a few rounds into that champ or that beefy yellow bar, you get a couple of orbs of power, you can go pick those up, get yourself some bolt charge, then all of a sudden, when it comes time to use an ability or whatever, you can call down that extra bolt of lightning that's going to jolt, stun, whatever, on top of the damage you're already causing. So it's a quick little tidbit that you can take advantage of. Any orb that you pick up with Storm Trance or just Arc Super in general equipped is going to give you stacks of bolt charge. So just a very simple, no-nonsense way to generate additional orbs of power while maintaining something that can also inflict jolt on targets and stun them, and also buff with the artifact. If you don't want to use Noxious Vetiver, there's a bunch of other options that you can use. It's not imperative that you have either attrition orbs or jolting feedback. However, it does help. First up on the list for substitutes, probably going to be Vantage Point. If you've seen any of my previous videos, or you can read how many enemies I've killed on the screen, knowing how often I cycle through my enemies, the fact that I even got to 5,000 says how much I love this weapon. Eddy Current Jolting Feedback, it hits like a truck. This would be my first recommendation. But you can pair with Agers, you can pair really anything in this energy slot as long as it's arc. So if you want to use an auto rifle with area damage, you can put the Prosecutor on with Dragonfly. You can put Come to Pass on with Dragonfly. You could also run double special with Karanos. You can put on Subjunctive if you want to run a 900 RPM weapon that generates energy really quick towards back your super. And you could always put on Brigand's Law or Division if you want to have the ability to pierce barrier champs bubbles intrinsically built. Now, Volshot, in my opinion, is not as amazing as Jolting Feedback, but there is a time and a place for that. And quite honestly, if you're going through different activities where you have time to reload and you're not, running for your life because of the heavy amount of ads, Volshot fits the bill for that as well. Not to mention, all of these are going to pair with the artifact because we're going to be getting rapid kills with these weapons, and they happen to match our super. So realistically, any of these options I have, or if you have one like Hard Light maybe, or something where you just want to take something in that's got arc, you don't care about champs or nothing, anything arc related, as long as you can maintain ammo economy, is going to win here. For the heavy slot, I highly recommend Crux Termination. Yes, I understand it's tough to get a roll like what I've got on the screen. I got ridiculously lucky. But I'm here to tell you that it is possible to get reconstruction and bipod on this thing. And when you pair that with impact casing, this thing hits like a truck. I'm talking 200k damage before I have to reload in most instances. And if you do throw on an Arc Reserve mod, which I wouldn't recommend for this build because we're trying to focus on Ager's Scepter, you can carry, what is it? It was like 12 or 16 rounds. So what does that come out to? I mean, it's like 1 million in damage just with, your rocket launcher, which is what you want. But the fact that you get 4 rounds before you got to reload when it's fully reconstructed is pretty nice. This would be my first recommendation, also because you can stun unstoppable champions with this. If you don't like Crux Termination, my next up on the list would be the Palmyra Bee. Good old Palmyra Bee. Only 2,500 enemies have been killed with this by me since I got it, but I highly recommend putting on auto-loading holster and explosive light. Explosive light's going to pair beautifully with Noxious Vetiver and just your build in general, because once you get to the max stacks, your rockets, even though yes, you only load one at a time, your rockets are going to be hitting for up to 100,000 damage. Is that every single time? No. But I promise you it is possible. Put on impact casing along with the enhanced version of these two traits, and you're going to have an insanely good single shot rocket launcher that you can work in between throwing your super, throwing Transcendence, using your abilities, and of course, Aegir's Scepter. If you don't have either of these, or you don't have them where you want to, you can always run with the Cynosure. The Cynosure comes with Reconstruction and Explosive Light. As you can see, I have 0 enemies killed because I just pulled this thing the other day, and I was like, wow, it does exist. So I've decided to put it in this video to give anybody out there hope that this new Strand rocket launcher that we've got can actually roll with something in case you've been getting terrible rolls like I have. But realistically, as long as it's a rocket launcher and as long as it matches kind of what you're trying to do, which is quick burst damage in between what you're doing with Aegir's Scepter, you're going to win. Now, Cynosure probably isn't going to be what I put on here, other than just for the explosive light perk to it. It would either be Palmyra or Crux, simply because both of these pair with kind of the theme of the build. Crux is nice, of course, because of the ammo economy, but Palmyra is nice because if you put a reserve mod on for your Aegers, you can also attribute that towards your Palmyra. For your helmet, I recommend putting on a heavy ammo finder, a special ammo finder, and a harmonic siphon. That's only going to leave a little bit of room for your mods, but if you can, try to swing it with either a 1 energy in case you want to put on a second mod or whatever, however you want to do it. If you don't want to use the heavy ammo finder, you can also put on hands-on. Hands-on will give you bonus super energy for every kill, and since you can basically bank on the idea that you're going to be getting multiple kills every time that you use Lightning Surge, it's a nice additional quality of life that, again, is going to help you be amplified. But however you want to mod, it's completely fine to you. Harmonic Siphon for sure, and at least a special ammo finder. So it's been a while, but Getaway Artist has made it back into my rotation. Dynamic Duo. Convert your Arc Grenade into an Arc Soul and become amplified. The Arc Soul functions as an autonomous turret. Now, some of you may be looking at this exotic armor, thinking about what I'm trying to do with this build, who have seen the previous video and go, you know what, why would I want to use Getaway Artist for this? This doesn't really seem like it's going to net you a bunch of damage. First of all, your Arc Soul is going to be a freebie. It's also going to free you up to be able to spam your melee, which means you don't have to worry about generating orbs of power with your grenade, which means you don't have to worry about generating grenade energy to begin with. Add to that the fact that every time that you consume your Arc Grenade, you're going to automatically be amplified, which means that at the beginning of an encounter when you are not amplified, for instance, you can make yourself amplified and move at the game speed that you prefer to move yourself in. Instead of having to get a couple of kills, which may or may not be possible depending on how difficult the encounter you're coming through is. Either way, I think it's a win-win because moving around the battlefield fast when you want to, I mean, just wins so much in terms of quality of gameplay. You get from point A to point B fast. You can run up, revive, and run away. You can jump in and out from behind cover a lot easier. You can avoid damage a lot easier. It's just nice to be able to have that on call. And then, oh, by the way, while you're doing all this, you got this autonomous turret that's just mowing enemies down, especially red bars, but it's also hitting pretty hard for yellow bars. For modifications, I recommend putting 3 heavy-handed on. The reason for this is, of course, we're not using our grenade for anything other than consumption. So once you consume the grenade, you can run around and keep doing your lightning surges and not have to worry about whether or not you're going to be generating orbs of power. With 3 heavy-handed equipped, you can generate an orb of power every 1 second with the melee, which means, you guessed it, if you are running around and you've got all 3 charges, you are going to be generating anywhere from 3+ times within 3 seconds, if you want. That's going to leave you with very little energy to spend for the general armor mod, but I promise you, I would rather take a -5 in a category than have to wait 5 seconds before I can run around, as I'm amplified, by the way, using my melee slower than I want to. For the chest armor, go ahead and put on a Stasis Reserve mod, put on 2 damage resistance mods, and whatever general armor mod that you need is completely fine here. Mod it however you need for the activity, but the goal here is to have more stasis ammo than anything else. For the leg armor, go ahead and put on double absolution and 1 invigoration, and then whatever general armor mod that you want. The reason that invigoration is important here is because you want to be able to get your melee back as fast as possible. If you do find yourself going into the nether arena, swap out one of these absolutions for recuperation and you will be just fine. But honestly, even with this, how I have it set, I really haven't run into like major problems in the nether. Just, you got to play a little bit smart. Bolt charge is not health, okay? So, but, you know, if you're making rapid kills and you're getting those healing orbs, you know, they buffed how much the healing orb gives back to you. So as long as you can pick up 1 or 2 of those during, you know, a difficult encounter, you should be fine. You really shouldn't have problems dying with this build, even without a recuperation. But I do highly recommend it. For the class item, go ahead and put on Reaper, Bomber, Font to Restoration, and whatever general armor mod that you want. Font to Restoration is important because health is always a necessity, especially in a situation where the only thing giving you health right now, as I have it set up, is Devour. So this is another way that you can recoup health faster by just playing into your build. Bomber is important because after you use your class ability and you get that kill, well, after you use the class ability, you're going to reduce the cooldown of your grenade intrinsically, which is important because we're using light energy main ad clear weapons. So putting on Bomber is going to get you your grenade back faster, which is going to make you amplified faster. And Reaper is just a nice quality of life. You know, get your free orb of power, get a little bit of health back, get a little bit of your energies back, and keep it moving. Go here. Unstoppable rocket launcher, overload trace rifles, and piercing sidearms. Of course, piercing sidearms may or may not be utilized depending on the activity that we go in. So at the bare minimum, we're going to have at least 2 champs accounted for with our build. In the second column, we're going to be using Vile Weave as well as Overclock and Lock. Vile Weave might not make sense, but in the event that we aren't using our Lightning Surge, let's say that we want to hit an enemy from a distance, maybe we don't have the luxury to run up to them and slide and activate it. Vile Weave, of course, when you throw your Arcane Needle at a target and it embeds itself in that target, once you defeat it, it will spawn a tangle. Not every time because there's a tangle cooldown, but you get the idea. So once you have that tangle, once you throw that at another target, that target is going to be severed. In the second column, we've got Dielectric and Elemental Siphon. Both of these are going to work in tandem. Rapid final blows with a kinetic weapon or a weapon matching your super creates an elemental pickup that matches your equipped super. The boost is elemental pickups grant matching super energy when they are collected. So this is going to arguably work even quicker than our stasis heavy or our other build version that I had before. And the reason for that is we're going to be using arc on arc. So whether it is our Crux Termination or Noxious Vetiver or Vantage Point or whatever arc weapon that you've got, rapid final blows with any of that, including if you pop off a single round of your rocket, it's going to generate that elemental pickup. Elemental pickups, of course, give you your ability energy back. And if you have the tome activated and you get the elemental pickup, it will give you additional super energy back on top of it. So you have quite a few ways to get your abilities back just by playing the game and taking advantage of what the artifact says. Dielectric, defeating arc debuff targets, grant bolt charge. Boost, rapidly defeating arc debuff targets, spawns an orb of power and heals a small portion of health. So you get that tome going, you get the additional health, which is going to be super important when you're running an arc class. And that's going to, again, work in tandem with your Overclock and Lock because you're going to be regularly getting bolt charge. That's just the way that it is. Which brings us to the next one, Flashover. When you gain maximum bolt charge, you also become amplified. Lightning bolts deal more damage. That's important. And that's going to work even better with Harsh Refraction simply because while you are amplified, you're harder to hit, which means when you have Harsh Refraction going, you're also dealing additional damage. So Harsh Refraction, trace rifles do more damage to targets affected by elemental debuffs matching their damage type. So theoretically, if you are running around and you hit this target with an overcharged shot of your Aegir Scepter, not only are you going to be generating shatter damage, which is going to give a dark debuff to the target, but the Trace Rifle is going to do additional damage. Add to that the fact that you're going to be periodically freezing the target, and you have a Trace Rifle that not only is going to be overflowed when you start, but is going to also be able to allow you to kind of play, I don't want to use the word conservatively, but when you're using your super in its natural state, sometimes you got to be aggressive, especially with the roaming super. This kind of takes the aggressiveness away from it and instead puts it all in your hands, literally, in the form of a trigger pull. So Harsh Refraction, if you haven't messed around with this and you haven't really messed around with Trace Rifles in a while, Aegir Scepter, takes huge advantage of this. We're also going to be running with Horde Shuttle and 2 Shreds. Now, I understand 2 Shreds and Horde Shuttle probably don't make a lot of sense to some people. You could make the argument of putting Photonic Flare on. You could make the argument of King's Vestige. You could make the argument for Disruptor Spike. Trust me, I get it, and I've experimented with all of them. This is just kind of where I always seem to fall because for whatever reason, I do find myself occasionally spawning Threadlings, so I'd rather just, and of course dealing with severed targets, so I'd rather just keep them on because too many times I've switched around and I go back into battle and I see them and I'm like, man, that's kind of a waste that I'm seeing that right now. I'm not getting anything out of it. At least this way, I know that's possible. I'm doing my main damage with my Aegir Scepter, and my main ad clear is not really hurting for ability energy regen, so the few times that I get my Horde Shuttle or 2 Shreds or Vile Weave in, moving, it's going to give you just a little bit of extra tick damage. And plus, people are using Strand all season long. It's not like that's going away anytime soon. In the final column, we've got Heavy Ordnance Regeneration. Dealing sustained damage to targets with a heavy machine gun or rocket launcher grants damage resistance and increases grenade and melee regeneration for a short duration. Boost. While Heavy Ordnance Regeneration is active, defeating powerful combatants disorients nearby rank and file combatants. That's going to be huge, but it's not necessary that you have that boosted, honestly, because you're just trying to do some quick hitter damage with your Crux Termination anyways, which is why I have the rocket launcher equipped in the first place instead of a machine gun. Yes, I know machine guns can do more consistent damage over longer periods of time, but my main consistent damage source is going to be Aegir Scepter. So when I'm not using that or when I'm trying to build up my super energy, I want to be able to fire off a few rounds of my rocket launcher, get that energy back to where I need it to be, give myself some grenade and free melee energy regen back, and then get back into consuming my super and running Aegir Scepter until the magazine goes to 0. So that is the build. One of the reasons why I would recommend this build is because in the last video, I didn't have some of the quality of life add-ons that we have here. The first, obviously, being that we are running with a Arc Super. I know that I put a notice in the last video that, hey, if you guys wanted to see this paired with another element instead of solar, to let me know. But when I moved on from that video and I started just dabbling, I thought to myself, well, how can I make this so that I can do exactly what I did in the last video, but faster? So unfortunately, I can't put the title as 11 million damage. How do we do that? Like I did the last one. But it is important to note, I died 5 times in that run that I showed you where I did just under 10 mil. So had I not been dead for those 30 seconds or whatever it cost or however long, those were all obviously during damage phases for bosses. It wasn't just like we were running around the Nether arena just taking out ads from time to time. So that's a big deal. You put out 1,000 rounds a minute with Aegir Scepter. So, if you're dead 5 times while you're trying to deal damage with this, that could be the difference between 9.6, 9.7 million and 11 million. So we were right there again with virtually a completely different build with only the same initial weapon. That's why you should try this, because being able to make multiple builds with multiple elements do essentially the same potent behavior as others that people will typically gravitate towards, makes this a very easy to assimilate to build. And it doesn't hurt that we have an arc and stasis surge in the Court of Blades going on right now. So a lot of good things with this build, and then add to the fact that you can run around the battlefield amplified pretty much the entire time. How many times are you guys getting bogged down behind one, piece of cover, wishing that you could get to the other side of the battlefield quicker than what your character can actually move? I know that happens to me all the time. I'm sure it happens to you too. This is another quality of life improvement that you can have with this. And if you want to remove Noxious Vetiver and put on something like Subjunctive has got a lightweight frame. So thereby you can move even faster, than you can move while you are amplified. And the autonomous turret kind of guards your 6 at the same time in case there's, exploder units or thrall that are sneaking up on you that you don't necessarily see coming. You've only got the ability to see in what your screen shows you. It doesn't show you everything that's going on around you too. So having that extra buddy to help you, it's something that you didn't have in the previous video. So when you add all that together, the ability to generate your super quickly, the ability to get your super back even quicker than what I have currently equipped, it makes it virtually the same but yet completely different build than what I just put out mere days ago. So if you do find anything helpful in this video, please consider liking and subscribing. Of course, I'm going to have a dim link as well as my Discord. If you guys are looking for a very nice, non-toxic gaming community, my Discord has been steadily growing. I've got some great people in there that are constantly bouncing off, ideas off of each other, trying to help each other out, asking for help, and others are helping others. No toxicity. You guys know I wouldn't put up with that anyways, but it's just turning into a really nice community. I actually did have someone the other night help me with a catalyst quest for the Borrowed Dyad, if you can believe it. So shout out to him. You know who you are. Thank you so much for helping me. But either way, I had multiple people. I said, hey, I need a little bit of help running this. You guys want to help? I had 3 people instantly that were like, yeah, we'll help you. It's just, those are the same 3 people that are, going to offer help to everyone. So if you guys are looking for that non-toxic community, I'm very, very proud of the community that's slowly growing. It's not, millions and millions of people big, but I'm telling you, the amount of heart that's in there is very well worth the mention right here. So shout out to my Discord for helping me out the other day, and then shout out to the individual that helped me the other day. And of course, shout out to the community in general for being so welcoming. When someone joins up in the Discord, there's like 4 or 5 or 6 or 10 people that are waving hi right away. It's really cool to see. You just don't see that in other Discords. So, unless it's your own clan, of course. But anyway, so I'm going to switch back over to a quick little highlight video and just kind of talk through a couple more things. But I want to thank you guys for your support. I'm going to switch it over right now. So one of the things that I wanted to quick touch on before we close this video up is ironically the same thing that I wanted to talk about last time I brought this up. When you are doing damage with Aegir Scepter and you need to stop for whatever reason, either the boss dies or they become shielded so your damage output does nothing, you can switch off Aegir Scepter and retain super energy for future usage. So you'll notice once you get used to this build, you'll be able to have steadily between 50 to 75%, if not more, of your super just waiting when you go back to clearing ads, building up your energies, or spamming your abilities to bring back your super. And honestly, that's going to, it's going to really help anybody out there who has trouble generating their super rapidly. It was one of the things that people like to do in the beginning once we got, craftable weapons, was being able to generate your super. But it's since become more about ability spam in general. But this is the best of both worlds. And not to mention being able to move around the battlefield lightning quick. It just makes this build so much better. So anyways, guys, without those 5 deaths, take a look. Who knows what we could have done? I'll see you guys next time.